Hi guys, welcome to the HGR Digital Assets Group podcast series where we speak with thought leaders in the crypto community. Today we have Jeffrey Billingham with us, and we're very lucky he's part of a project called Chainalysis. How are you doing today, Jeff?
Hey, Sean, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and really looking forward to speaking with you. And the first question that we have is, can you just tell us a bit more about your background and what Chainalysis does and how you guys are differentiated from any of your competitors, if any?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I actually got into this space myself. I was working on a trading floor in 2012 when I heard a few individuals there talking about trying to arb Bitcoin between Mt. Gox and I think it was local Bitcoins, like two exchanges. This is at the tail end of 2012. And that's sort of like when my Bitcoin as a hobby kind of thing started. I think I spent most of 2013 and 2014 on Reddit. That's sort of definitely where I fell on the rabbit hole. Yeah. And then, fast forward to 2015, I left the trading environment, I was working at a market data firm, leading all of their blockchain efforts. I came to Chainalysis at the end of 2017. I think this might be a familiar story to you and maybe some of your listeners. But Thanksgiving 2017 was a bit of a turning point for me because, Bitcoin was like approaching all-time highs. So I had people from like high school and even middle school, like reaching out to me asking how they could get Bitcoin. I had some of my like wiser family members and family friends, asking me if I worked for Bitcoin. So that's sort of when I knew I had to go full time. So I joined the team at Chainalysis at the beginning of December of 2017. And at Chainalysis, what we're doing is we're building trust in blockchains. So in concrete terms, what that really means is we deliver software that offers insight into transaction patterns, transaction trends to marketplaces that exist within a crypto asset blockchain. This serves our customers in two different ways. First, we provide investigative software to help uncover and offer insight into money laundering schemes or any sort of crypto asset activity that's associated with illicit businesses. The second takes the form of a suite of compliance tools we call KYT, that stands for Know Your Transaction. And these help cryptocurrency businesses, like any business that is taking or holding cryptocurrency on behalf of third parties or for themselves. It helps them better understand the risk level of potential customers based on the associations that customer's wallet has, and where they send from and receive to, or rather send to and receive from.
Got it. So you guys do, it seems like, would it be accurate to say AML types of software for the blockchain? And if so, I guess currently the industry incumbents are mostly KYC vendors for traditional transactions, right? You have your FICO, your Fiserv, Nice, Actimize, and other players like that. Are you guys overlapping in your market in any way, or do you guys cater to completely different customers?
Yeah, it's merely our transaction-based AML and KYT, like the KYT Know Your Transaction software, is all really serving all of these new businesses that are very focused and come through and have been built upon really Bitcoin, right? So anyone who is transacting with or holding cryptocurrency or crypto assets come to us to get some semblance of AML and KYC within a more holistic sort of compliance workflow within their business.
Got it. So this is mostly catered to money transmission businesses, hedge funds, or what exactly is your typical client base?
Yeah. And so anyone who is transacting or working to transact between counterparties, many counterparties in themselves. So exchanges are sort of a natural client base here, payment processors, really anyone who has any sort of exposure to crypto assets, or wants to sort of gain some better understanding or some functioning relationship between themselves and a cryptocurrency business. They come to us to sort of understand what that relationship would look like based on the crypto asset holdings between those two firms.
And your business, I just wanted to clarify, is this global or is this restricted to North America only?
Oh, we're global. We're very global. Yeah. And actually, so the teams on the largest two like hubs for us, were located in New York and Copenhagen, but we definitely serve folks all over the globe.
Got it. That's pretty cool then. So I think I understand that the know your transaction and that part of the story. So the first part is that, are you guys providing like data analytics or like machine learning types of solutions, or how would you explain like your typical client profile for that first service that you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. What I like to start with is sort of like looking at any sort of blockchain explorer, right? A lot of people in the space are familiar with going to a blockchain explorer to see, at least in Bitcoin's world, if we just keep this to a discussion about Bitcoin, you see a bunch of like the left side of your screen is a bunch of alphanumeric nonsense, which are the inputs. You see Bitcoin or some certain amount of Bitcoin going to another group of alphanumeric bunches, which are the outputs, right? So yeah, you can sort of see there's like a high degree of transparency because anyone who can access really the internet can see Bitcoin's transactions, but they don't really mean anything to anyone upon first glance, right? In our world, instead of seeing, a bunch of cryptocurrency addresses send Bitcoin to another group of cryptocurrency addresses. In our world, you see, like gambling site sent Bitcoin to dark web market. So it's that kind of sort of, the intelligence that we have in that space is sort of how we can deliver something of value to clients there. So we sort of bring a little bit more insight and a little bit more of a visualization to who is actually transacting with whom at like a very high level on Bitcoin's blockchain.
Got it. That sounds super useful, and I think there's definitely a use case there. One thing that you mentioned is that you got into crypto 2012, which is super early. So it seems like you rode the Bitcoin roller coaster up and down through the loops and the falls. But a recurring topic that we still have today is whether or not this crypto asset or just Bitcoin, is it a bubble? And there's a lot of people who don't believe in Bitcoin as a store of value or as a medium of exchange. So what do you feel about this, about Bitcoin, and which use case do you think it's best suited for and why?
Yeah, sure. This is a really great question. And given like I have been in this space for a while and I've learned so much from this and I'm really enthusiastic about Bitcoin, like take a grain of salt with this. But I actually think the most constructive position to take on this at this point, just given that we've been in a lot of these arguments now for years, right? Like what is Bitcoin, what isn't Bitcoin? I think the most constructive point to make here is that Bitcoin simply is, right? And that's actually all that matters, right? Like Bitcoin is software that exists in the wild. It's moving and shaking ideologies and assumptions. It's challenging terms, it's challenging definitions that we've used for centuries when it comes to the concept of money or currency or fiat currency or value or trade. Like all of these terms, are really sort of like associated with Bitcoin and its abilities in different ways, but it's not a perfect match, right? So that I think, given that it's 2018, it's still a very, very early time for Bitcoin and all of the sort of work that's happening in the crypto asset space, that it simply exists and plainly functions without a care to what I or Warren Buffett or anyone has to opine on its qualities. Like, I think that speaks for what makes Bitcoin's current and future use cases so special. I really think that Bitcoin will have its own descriptive adjectives in the future, and we're just kind of struggling with building that bridge right now.
I love your analogy saying that Bitcoin has already been out there in the wild, and I think it makes sense to think of Bitcoin as like an animal, right? Maybe it's like a boar, it's shifting its optimal size, its horns, and all that other good stuff. So, Bitcoin, most people say that it's it is like the mother of all the other coins. And another coin that is gaining popularity is Ethereum. So, given that Ethereum is trying to disrupt contract law, how do you think like the legal landscape will change? Do you think there'll be a shift for lawyers to learn how to code? or even like maybe accountants will need to learn how to do code audits. How do you see this compliance landscape changing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I actually, I come at it not from like the blockchain position, but rather just like what are the needs and what are the sort of the redundancies that exist within, I guess, the legal world, right? And when you think of it that way, I think the business case here is actually a little bit bigger than just the blockchain, right? Even if like the blockchain zeitgeist didn't exist, there are plenty of processes that are uncoordinated and super redundant in any highly specialized service, especially like legal services. And many different tools have aided that. A lot of the most effective tools have definitely been the software products that we've seen come up in this space over the last 30 or 40 years. And I guess like you could say that lawyers use language in creative ways to create rules. At a very, very simple high level. And if you understand and accept software to be just another language that can be used in creative ways to set rules, then I would say that entrepreneurial lawyers should probably familiarize themselves with this language. And I would imagine like those who do would find like a lot of time saved, efficiency gains, all those kinds of things in this space. Now, if Ethereum does provide that, which like absolutely in some specific use cases, it's shown that there are interesting ways to sort of automate agreements and eliminate those redundancies, then great. If there are other technologies out there, great. I think coding at a very high level is definitely something that lawyers will definitely start to make sense of and deploy in the near future, blockchain or otherwise.
And one interesting thing that you probably know is that when you mentioned coding as a language, I think legally it was actually determined to be a language in, I think, Bernstein versus, I think, Department of Defense. I think back then, code was thought of as, like, it was classified as, like, military software or, like, weapons or arms. And there was a case where someone argued that software is actually speech and shouldn't be regulated based on standards applicable to military standards. So yeah, right. I think that's like pretty interesting.
And I think there are actually a few firms. I can't remember which ones, but I feel like I've seen in the news recently, like some firms are offering like coding classes to their lawyers now too. So I think it's just only a matter of time.
Oh wow, yeah, that's pretty cool. When people try to understand nascent technologies, they always try to map it onto something that already happened, right? So the thing that I'm thinking about is people talk about public versus private blockchains as intranet versus internet. What do you feel about this like dichotomy? And are there cases which you think private blockchains are better than public blockchains? And if so, yeah, where do you find private blockchains adding more value?
Yeah, I think sort of, my default, my goal has always been, especially in this space where so many people take so many different sides, like immediately, I try and not be mutually exclusive about these sort of like false camps that we've created in this space, like public or private, Bitcoin or Ethereum, privacy coins, or, I try not to do anything like that here. That said, I mean, from a very practical standpoint, I think, the blockchains that seem to work and have the most, network value, I use that term lightly, but those that works are public, right? And even then, it's highly dependent upon what that blockchain actually accomplishes. Most of the public ones out there that are working are like value generating ecosystems. I think private blockchains, on the other hand, like there isn't much in terms of like just massive organic growth, right? We haven't seen like a private blockchain like I guess spawn the way that some of these more like public crypto token or crypto asset blockchains have. And I think it's often because we find that they are just reinventing the wheel, right? Like the minute that the concept of identities is brought into the equation, that's effectively what a private blockchain is, right? We're just like saying we know who the nodes are on this network. The minute that identity layer is brought into the equation, like you very quickly find that, a blockchain in those scenarios typically doesn't provide like a fundamentally better solution than what already exists. Now, that's not to say that what exists isn't like imperfect and in some cases really terrible, right? Like we have a lot of outdated systems out there. But that doesn't, I think that blockchain isn't necessarily the answer, or at least blockchain as like a top-down sort of like deployable solution is probably not the best way to think about it. I think maybe there are some spaces where, you can use decentralization in a more effective way. There are probably like interesting places to deploy something that would eliminate a lot of or at least provide some synchronization between different counterparties. That would be helpful, but I don't know if that's like necessarily blockchain yet. And also like the conversation around private blockchains rather is not value generating the way it is in the public space, right? It's typically a cost savings attempt. We're looking at a bunch of costs that are built up, in sort of like the middle and back office spaces of the world, at least in finance. And the conversation is just a little bit different when you're trying to save on costs, right? Things move a little bit slower. When people see new value being created, things move faster. It's just sort of like the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I totally agree with all your comments. They're very insightful. Another interesting topic is the topic of initial coin offerings. So the market has evolved fairly quickly, and how do you see the direction changing in the next few years? Do you think that the ICO market is too saturated and too mature already, or I guess with regards to regulatory compliance, I think I just saw recently on Twitter that there's like a new term called security token offerings now, and like there's just like so much going on with the tokenization of assets. How do you feel this landscape will evolve in the next few years?
Yeah, I think it's really important to strike like an optimistic note here, and I think there's a reason to be like very optimistic with what the ICO world has shown us thus far. I always like to say that there was definitely a time when the New York Stock Exchange was like not, this beautiful structure like full of internet fiber optic cables and like lots of technology. It used to be like a bunch of people with pieces of paper coming around trying to like generate wealth. And I think the ICO market is probably in some stage of is analogous to that early stage of the stock market as we knew it, years and years and years and years ago when it first started. So I am definitely optimistic about it. Like ICOs have proven that you can raise capital in a technically savvy and kind of an operationally less cumbersome way with the widest possible audience, right? You can all be present on the internet essentially. So I think that concept has proven itself and it's not going to go away. But like that definitely opens up the world to a lot of pump and dump schemes, a lot of just like crazy scenarios that are there just for the sake of like making a quick buck. I don't think those are going to exist in the near future. And I definitely think we'll see a consolidation soon. And I think in the longer term, we'll probably see this space change in I would say two ways. Like first on the legal and regulatory side, like there are rules in place that we have for investments, and those will be applied here in some sort of format, right? So I definitely think we can expect that, and I think we should definitely like promote that. Also, like ICOs aren't a one size fits all. I think we still need some better taxonomy and better descriptors in this place. You have some tokens out there that are akin to like equity ownership, right? And you have some tokens out there that are more sort of like productive. They're sort of more commodity-like coins. So we need to like have coins really distinguish themselves in this space. And again, it comes down to education, like educating people on how some of these coins behave differently. I think that will help separate, the real opportunities from some of these like more questionable projects that have come to light over the last 12 months.
Yeah, I think those are totally true. With regard to your comments on the New York Stock Exchange, I think that's why in financial terms we still use like coupons and like pink sheets, even though like they're pretty, like they're all electronic now, right? And then to your point on the the two ways the landscape will change. I think you have very good comments. An interesting an interesting thing is that it is quite hard to determine what exactly a security is, and I think in a lot of past cases there have been circumstances where like beavers were considered securities and orange groves were considered securities as well. So it seems like there's always people who are trying to manipulate the system and interpret the words in a way that maximizes whatever they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these projects too, it's they're creating assets that don't even fit these buckets that well, or maybe they behave like an equity ownership. They behave like equity ownership at one point in its life cycle, and then otherwise it can sort of like behave like a crypto commodity of sorts, right? So, some of these assets, what you accrue to yourself by owning them, changes over the course of the lifetime of the project or the product or the asset or what have you. So it's definitely a challenging thing for any sort of like lawmaker or regulator.
I agree. Like the animals evolve, right? So I'm not like a biologist, but I don't know, like tadpoles to like whatever the thing in between like the frog is to the frog.
Yeah.
So
I'm a big fan of analogies, so I totally dig it. Or I'm thinking like a chameleon too, or something something that like changes its color depending upon its environment.
I'm probably gonna use that. I think that's probably a better one.
There you go. Yeah, we're big on analogies at Chainalysis. So.
Yeah, so you obviously know like a lot, and you've seen a lot of different types of coin offerings. Aside from the Coinbase coins, do you think there's any other protocols that are very promising, and why do you think so?
I definitely think that there's a lot of like really incredible stuff being built in this space. I won't name any specific coin, but I think like the ones that most interest me, just on a personal level, are those that seek to sort of incentivize user behavior in a social network, or like allow people to sort of like somehow monetize their data or monetize bandwidth. Those I think are really pretty interesting. And like those that exist in this space are really have shown like just really sort of like perverse incentives in some cases. It's like a really interesting, it's almost like an anthropological case for someone to look at the way that like something like Steam has been used. I was also pretty fascinated to see where stablecoins go. I know everyone's pretty excited about some of those projects out there as well.
Yeah, I love that. When you incentivize, I think Charlie Munger has a great quote on like how before you decide on any investment, you need to understand how managers are incentivized, because that drives decision making more than any other emotion. But interestingly, like I saw on Twitter that Warren Buffett said that Bitcoin is like rat poison squared. I don't know if you saw that on the news as well.
What was that? Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
I think Charlie Munger's partner, or I guess it should be the other way around. So Warren Buffett, he said that Bitcoin is like rat poison.
Oh yeah, rat poison squared, or like rat poison to the nth degree or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just add up to the list at this point. There have been like plenty of people who are totally entitled to their opinions. I'd rather be on the opposite side and not be on. There's a big list of. There are two camps. There's a big list of very bright and intelligent people who think Bitcoin is a scam, and there are plenty of really bright and intelligent people who think Bitcoin is the future. And I am very comfortable in the second camp.
Yeah, I think I have that similar mindset as well. So I think one of the key themes in the evolution of capital markets is getting institutional players in the game. And I think one of the key problems that a lot of institutions have right now is the problem of asset custody. So how do you think this problem can be solved, and how like what's the timeline for this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I totally agree. It's sort of like one of the sort of preeminent concerns of the space. Custody is a really tough nut to crack. I think what's exciting is you're definitely seeing many offerings sort of come about in this space, or many, many different offerings and many different products and services that sort of seek to like provide value to that like asset protection in a way that we just haven't seen. We haven't really seen the activity that we've seen in the last like 6 to 12 months like ever before. What makes this unique though is I think that most of the custody solutions that exist in the crypto asset space are born out of technology, right? A lot of them are born out of, really incredible wallet software, right? Like wallet engineering, cold storage solutions, a lot of multi-sig technology. Like a lot of these companies are the ones who are developing custody solutions. In sort of the traditional incumbent financial services space, the concept of custody is not it's not like a technical product. It's rather just like it's a legal concept, right?
Yeah.
That's enforced by the SEC. So, trying to understand how like technology can solve for a lot of the things that the concept, like the legal concept of custody does in the real world today, like in a cryptographically secured kind of world, is the challenge, right? Like how does like advanced wallet software actually, how does it commoditize a lot of the work that goes into custodying paper money these days, right? Or how much does cryptographic technology commoditize all of the effort that goes into like securing paper documents or paper certificates that designate ownership or value or equity to a specific company? That's really like the challenge. There's no legal concept of sort of crypto custody in this space, and I think that's definitely up and coming. That's like probably in tandem with a lot of the regulation that's coming on board, is like how do we sort of conceive of legal custody in this space when all we're talking about is like cryptographic key pairs at the end of the day.
Got it. That's an excellent point, and you're obviously super thoughtful about thinking through these trends. One of the things that Ari Paul said in a recent conference at UPenn is that when you look at these emerging technologies, there's always someone who's going to tell you Bitcoin is not going to work because, and that because, he said, not every single, but a lot of these becauses will eventually become billion-dollar companies, just as you saw in the internet space. People said the internet wasn't going to work because you weren't going to get retail adoption. It wasn't going to work because people weren't willing to put their credit cards anonymously on the internet, and all of these became billion-dollar enterprises. So I think that, to your point, a good optimistic view of thinking through these problems. So yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. Really appreciate it. And
yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you.